All right, everyone can hear me? I think 10:15, I think we can start. Thank you all for coming. My name is Deepak. I'm a program manager in the Microsoft Exchange team. Our team is the archiving and compliance team. Before we start, real quick question for you guys. What's the pattern here? Anyone with an answer wins an Xbox. Kidding. Sorry? Perfect. I wish I could give you an Xbox, but I don't have one. I'll try to put in a word for the Surface. That's right. So all these guys, they got fined for compliance because, and that's the reason why you're here. Email compliance is important. It's become more and more important today in the digital age. Actually, if you see this, back in 1999, Philip Morris got fined, and then even like last week, I think I read a news on Monday that said one of the Wall Street brokers, they got fined for compliance. So there is a need for email compliance and document compliance today, and Microsoft hopes to satisfy those compliance needs for you, and that's why I'm sure you guys are all here. So I want you guys to leave with 3 big takeaways today. I actually had this cool Iron Man feature today, because I was talking about 3 things: reduce risk, simplify, and save money, right? So I thought I'll put in an Iron Man feature and all that, but then apparently Warner Bros. Doesn't want me to be doing that. So I had to settle for, stuff like this. Creative Commons, by the way. Reduce risk. Today, when you talk about email compliance, the single biggest thing that people want to know is how do you do immutability, right? How do you make sure that your email is tamper-proof and it cannot be deleted? That is the main thing that I'm going to be talking about, and that feature is in place hold. What that means is we hold your data for a certain period of time or indefinitely. Now, what does that mean from a server standpoint? We need to store a really, really large amount of data. That's why we are the archiving team of Exchange, right? And in Exchange, in 15, that's been, honestly, the single biggest investment is how large we can make our mailboxes go. So over the past few years, we've been running the Office 365 service, and we do offer unlimited archives in the service today. And we keep up our word. So we know that we have really, really large mailboxes today, order of 100 GB and upwards. From a reducing risk standpoint, we guarantee that our in-place hold is going to satisfy all your immutability requirements. The second part of that reducing risk is records management. What does that mean? You don't want to keep your data for longer than it is required today. And we do that, we help you do that through our retention tags and retention policies. So 2 huge features that guarantee that your risk is reduced. And one of the biggest selling points of Microsoft Exchange 2013 in compliance is actually not just Microsoft Exchange 2013, it's SharePoint, Exchange, and Lync. So what we've done is we've actually started talking to the people in the other Microsoft teams and said, hey, you want to work with me? We can actually build this together. And that's actually come true. So with Federation, you can actually now do e-discovery and hold across SharePoint, Exchange, and Lync. You don't have to go do disparate sources. You don't have to make sure that you've captured everything, because the way you do it today from SharePoint, you can do the case management, which means it's going to go out and get your data from SharePoint, Exchange, and Lync. And I'll talk about Lync separately, because what we've done is we now do all the archiving for Lync in Exchange. And we've made that change so that you don't have to go and have a separate data source for that. The second part that I want you to go away with is simplicity. After we've been doing Office 365, we know that we have a certain targeted set of people. 3 sets, actually. So for the first thing, all you guys, IT admins, we want to make sure that your life is simple, and with all of compliance coming into Exchange, we shouldn't complicate your lives, right? So the way we did it was, how do I make it as simple as possible for you guys to manage all of this without a huge learning curve? So when you talk about the archive mailbox, you get the best of breed. So you want managed availability in your primary mailbox, you get the same with the archive mailbox. And you want to do your whole management, we've got a great new EAC UI for you guys. We've got PowerShell commands. Again, really easy, what you're already used to. For the lawyers and the compliance officers, we've made our e-discovery tool really simple. We've got a wizard for you, and I'll be showing you that. So for the guys who like the UI more, it's a great piece of work by our designers. And then finally, the end users. Those guys are always, so we actually had a couple of people at the booth yesterday from Cornell University. And I think Bharat tweeted about that as well. They mentioned that email is the oxygen for corporate life, and the mobile phone, the smartphone, is the pacemaker. I thought it was a very powerful statement. And we want to make sure that whatever compliance we built into Exchange does not affect the workflow of the end user. So we made it as seamless as possible. We integrated this into Outlook and OVA, and it makes sure that the end user does not get affected in any way. And then finally, the most important thing is money. At the end of the day, you guys are here because you know that with Exchange being your compliance solution, you will be able to make a lot of savings. And I'll talk about that specific thing later on towards the end. And I'll give you a case study. I think I have one customer who's willing to, give us data on how they use our 2013 solution. So I'll talk to you about that, and I'll talk about how, the current solution really reduces the cost of, e-discovery, and the fact that you have these really, really large mailboxes means that, if storage is cheap, you can use Exchange and make a lot of cost savings. So as I mentioned before, I'll be talking about 4 main things today. Your storage management, which is your archive; immutability, which is in place whole; data governance, which is records management, our retention policies; and finally, e-discovery. Archiving. So I had a gentleman come up to me just now and ask me, why do you need an archive mailbox? I'm sure a lot of people here, how many people here actually know or have used the archive mailbox? Just a show of hands. Oh, lots of you. For those who don't know what the archive mailbox is, it's an online-only mailbox. So when we were designing the solution back in 2010, and even today, actually, the fact that we found was most of our clients or most of our customers use Outlook 2007 and 2010. Now, we know that in Exchange Server 2013, as I mentioned before, the mailboxes can be over 100 gigs. The store team and the managed availability team have done a great job. The search works. Everything works beautifully. But the client, your Outlook client, which is what everyone uses today, no matter what people say, we have OVA, which is amazing, but still people want Outlook, right? Now, the Outlook client can only handle a certain amount of data that can be downloaded to their OST, right? If it exceeds a certain amount, and if you want the details, you can come to me later, and I'll talk to you about that. It basically stops working. You have performance issues. So we had to make a decision if we were going to make the primary mailbox the store of all your archive, or we're going to make it a separate container that does not sync down even if the client runs in cached mode. So that's why we designed the archive mailbox to be an online-only mailbox. And it is available to be accessed by your Outlook 2007 and 2010 clients. Now, the benefits of this archive mailbox, especially if you're running on Office 365, we want you to get all your PST files into this archive. We want you to get any other sources that you store your archive data, we want it in your archive, because the archive can scale. It can actually hold a lot of your data. Now, what does this mean for the end user, though? It's the exact same experience that they get with their primary mailbox. They will be able to flag items, they will be able to reply to items, and with the brand new search that we've introduced in 2013, we have search that spans across your primary and archive, and your conversations especially are now going to be spanning both your primary and archive. So for the end user, it's an amazing experience because it's exactly what they're used to. Now for the IT admin, once again, we give them a separate quota for the archive. So you can manage your quota separately, and the best part is you can put your archive in a separate database that doesn't have to be in the primary database. And this is especially useful if you have, you've already purchased really expensive disks and you want to deploy your archives. You don't have to do that. You can purchase, less expensive disks and deploy these really big archive mailboxes. As I mentioned before, all your PST files can be imported into the archive, and the best part about this is your in-place hold, your e-discovery, auditing, all of this stuff is going to work seamlessly across your primary and archive mailbox. And I'll give you guys a quick demo of how to actually deploy an archive mailbox. Let me actually switch over and show you guys how that's done. All right, you can see this. So I'm in PowerShell right now. I've got Garth Ford. So he does not have an archive today. This is an Office 365 E15 server, right? I've got my amazing brand new, EAC, Exchange Admin Center. So if I go in here, I see that Garth Ford over here. I'm just going to highlight him. He does not have an archive right now. So all I need to do is just click that. Wait. And there you go. The guy has an archive now, right? So takes a bit of time, I guess. There you go. That's it. It's that simple to provision an archive mailbox. Now today in Office 365, by default, we provision an archive for 100 gigs. And if you want more data, if you want a little more quota, you can contact us and we'll raise it appropriately. So it's that simple to provision an archive mailbox. Now when you do this, especially if you're in Office 365, what you also get is a 2-year move to archive default policy. So what that means is the next time your Manage Folder Assistant runs, how many of you here know what the Manage Folder Assistant is? For the people who don't, it's basically an automated scheduled job that goes through every mailbox and either does deletion or it tries to move stuff to the archive. So all you need to do is schedule it, and it's going to go and do its job. You don't have to do anything about it, right? And I'll talk about that Manage Folder Assistant as I come to it, talk about it in retention. So all this is going to do, anything over 2 years, it's going to automatically move it to the archive, right? So which means your primary mailbox is still within a certain limit, and all the stuff that is older is now going to your archive. And we've done some extensive research, and we found that users don't access anything older than 6 months, not a lot actually, and if they want to, they use search, right? And that's why we focused on search to make the archive experience really nice. So I've actually got this guy's mailbox over here. And if you see, I don't see an archive here anymore. I don't see an archive now. I'm just going to refresh it and see if it shows up. You see, Outlook Web App is pretty awesome. For all the people who say that, especially people with the Mac Outlook, it's pretty awesome because you can use your Outlook Web App and it's going to do a great job. I don't know why it's not showing up. Give me 1 second. Give it a little bit of time and I guess it'll show up. no luck for me today. I'll get back to you on that. So going back to the presentation. So this is your archive mailbox. Like I said, integrated search in OA, integrated search in Outlook, and the conversation view, great for the end users. As I mentioned before, link archiving. So previously what you had to do was, in Link, you had to store it in a separate database, all your data, and you had to pull that source when you do your e-discovery searches. That's no longer required in 2013. We've made sure that Link and Exchange talk to each other. So if you place somebody on in-place hold, what that means is it's going to automatically put all your Link data inside the purges folder. And I'll talk about the purges folder separately. It's kind of a hidden folder, right? If you don't put it on hold, we still pull the data from the server and put it in a conversation view folder, right? So the integration with Link and Exchange today, it's pretty amazing, and you don't have to do anything special to pull those things, into one location. So this was the old story. Now in the new story, as I mentioned, everything goes into Exchange. So Exchange is your one-stop shop. And once it's in Exchange, you will be able to do all your e-discovery, all your audits and in-place holds, again, one place. So the one marked in green, that's the hidden folder inside your mailbox. All right, the next feature, in-place hold. How many of you have heard about litigation hold feature in Exchange? All right, lots of people. For the ones who don't know what it is, litigation hold was a feature we introduced in 2010 again. It's really simple. If you put a mailbox on litigation hold, nothing you ever did could delete anything from that mailbox. Let's say I'm a trader in Wall Street. Unfortunately, that's the same example I have to use every single time. And I'm trying to do some insider trading. And I try to send a secret email to Sanjay, my colleague here, and say, hey, the Microsoft stock's going to go up. You should definitely buy some right now. And then, I know that I'm under investigation because somebody else has been ratting out on me. Now, what do? I'm trying to go and find that email that I sent to Sanjay and say, delete this. And I'm smart. I'm a power user, so I go into my Outlook, I go into my recover deleted items, and I go there and say, purge. Now, I think, yes, it's all gone. Yeah? Nobody can catch me now. But then that's when in-place hold or litigation hold kicks in. Litigation hold makes sure that nothing ever gets deleted from your mailbox, right? Which means we put it in a hidden folder, and that is the hidden folder that you just saw. So that was a litigation hold feature. The one other thing that the litigation hold feature does is if you try to delete that mailbox itself, you still cannot delete it because the mailbox delete will fail. So there's two things that we do. We make sure that your deletions fail, and we make sure that your mailbox does not get deleted. So this way, your data is immutable. What about tampering? What if I go into that email and say, don't make it a harmless email, say, hey, Sanjay, how was lunch today? Still, what we do today with litigation hold is we maintain copies of everything that was sent, right? If the guy is on hold, no matter how much he tries to tamper with it, we still maintain the original copy. And this hidden folder that we are talking about, it's not accessible to the end user. It is only accessible to the people with discovery permissions. And that role would be your discovery management role. So if a lawyer comes in and does an e-discovery search on Microsoft stock and says, Sanjay, it's going to go find Sanjay, it's going to find Deepak, and it's going to find that both of us have been talking about it, and there you go. That's your smoking gun. That's what the lawyers call it. So that was a litigation hold feature. Now, the problem with the litigation hold feature was it was indefinite, and it was the widest net that you could cast, which meant you would hold everything, which meant your data would accumulate for like a huge amount. And that makes it difficult for the lawyers because they literally have to print out every single thing and read through it. So reviewing becomes a problem because you have such a wide, swath of data. So what customers wanted us to do, and thank you for this feedback, is I want to do item-based hold, right? Now, the way we've implemented that is into your discovery workflow, you bring in, you put in a query, and you put in all the mailboxes that you want to search and say, hold all the stuff that matches that query. And that's a much more efficient way of doing it, right? Because you're not holding everything. And the other important thing is, you want to hold items only for a certain amount of time. And this is how, I'm pretty sure all of you know about this. If you have a retention policy in your organization that says, I will only hold items for 7 years, and your opposing lawyer says, hey, I want this email that Sanjay sent to Deepak 10 years ago. You can go to the judge and say, we have a clear policy that is a 7-year policy. We are not expecting to give you that, that piece of evidence that you're requesting. And the judge's going to say, yes, he's right. He's got a 7-year policy. I see evidence for it. So there's no way he's going to be able to produce it. And I'm not going to say anything about that, right? So that's where we introduced time-based hold, which means for that time period, for the 7 years, you are going to be able to find that item no matter what. Now, after 7 years, what happens? You need to make sure that you're not liable, and that's where your retention policy comes in. Retention's basically cleaning up after your hold expires, and I'll talk about that. So going back to the new feature, in-place hold, this is query-based, which means you enter your discovery query. I don't know how many people attended the discovery session yesterday. Actually, it was on Monday, I think. When was it? Yeah. Anyone attend that session? No? That's good. Then I'll definitely show you guys the demo. I'll jump right into it. All right. So as you see over here, this is what I'm highlighting over here. That's the compliance management. So we've basically put everything in one place. And I don't want to click through, so I just had a new tab open. So your compliance management is the one-stop shop. It's got all your in-place e-discovery and hold. It's got your auditing. It's got your DLP. And it's got retention and journal, right? Now, what I'm interested right now is the in-place discovery and hold. So let me walk you guys through how this works. This is a brand new UI in Exchange 2013. I give it a name. I'll say TechEd demo. Right? And over here, the first step you want to do is specify which mailboxes you want to search, right? Now you can choose to, let me step back just a little bit and talk about the e-discovery workflow over here. The first thing you do when somebody comes to you with a case is you have to do some initial discovery, which is cast a wide net and figure out this is what we want to hold, right? So the first step is holding stuff. You want to make sure that you've got all the right custodians identified, and you want to make sure that all the data for those custodians is identified. The way you do that is through in-place hold. And so the first thing you do, specify your mailboxes. So I know that Garth has been involved in one of these things. So I'm going to go in and pick Garth from this list. Right? And if you notice over here, I also have all my DLs in here. So let's say this is, again, something that the execs have been involved in. I can add them in there. So I say, OK. So I've got my DL, and I've got Garth in there. Next, do I include all the mailbox content? So that's going back to the litigation hold that I was talking about. Include everything. Or do I specify a query, right? Now, this query over here, If you don't know, Microsoft acquired this company called Fast Search, and Fast Search is was the leader of vertical search or enterprise search. We first integrated that into SharePoint, and we called it Search Foundation. And in 2013, we've integrated that into Exchange, into e-discovery across SharePoint and Exchange. Your Fast Search, the biggest advantage it gives you is amazing query language, and it's called KQL. So you can actually go in and enter specific queries. So let's say this particular example I'm talking about, it's two toy companies who are fighting each other because one toy company thinks that the other toy company stole his idea, right? Happens in the real world. So the first, the first toy company's name is Wingtip, and they think that they've sent out some confidential information. Now, this cool thing about this is I have this KQL syntax with near, right? What that means is if there is any word that occurs within the number that I specify in those braces, it's going to find everything that matches that. So if I say Wingtip Toys or Wingtip Toy Star, it's going to find Wingtip Toys, Wingtips -- Toy Maker, etc., etc. So lawyers love this stuff. If you're a lawyer, it makes it really, really simple to write queries. You've also got all your booleans, so you've got and, or, not, and the wildcard that I just put in there. Now, the other things that you can do with this e-discovery is you can specify the start date and end date, so you have a rough idea of when these email conversations went. You can say, okay, these are the people who might have sent it. And the best part over here, you can actually go in and select the message type, which means you say, I want to search just my email, or I want to search documents, etc. Now, I'm running this from Exchange because I'm pretty sure all of you guys are Exchange power users. But if you do it from SharePoint, you can search SharePoint, Exchange, and Link. From here, I'm searching just Exchange and Link. Right? Now, with SharePoint, you get the exact same interface. You do case management, and I'll put up links on that in my presentation so you can go in and take a look at it later. Or, after this, if you guys want to stop over at the office booth down the expo section, we'll be glad to help you. I've got my colleagues here to answer questions as well. So let's say I want to search just emails, right? So I select email over here, and I hit next. And then this is in place hold. So you see how well we've integrated it, right? You're casting the first net. You're saying, this is what we think will cover everything. So I'm just going to make sure that this data doesn't get deleted. Now, the first thing I do is say, yeah, place it on hold. Now, do I want to hold it indefinitely, or do you want to hold it for a certain amount of time? So I'm going to say I'll hold it for 10 years, so that's 3650, right? And once I hit finish, it's going to create a search object, and that search object contains, and it's stored in the arbitration mailbox, or the system mailbox as you guys might know it. And what it's going to do is make sure that anything that matches that query does not get deleted. And I'll explain that. So when I hit finish, you'll notice something. The Wi-Fi is pretty slow over here, so I don't know. While that happens, I'll try this. Still going. No luck for me here. There you go. So this is what I wanted to show you guys. If you remember, I had hit executives as a DL. What in-place hold does is it goes and expands the DL and puts everyone in that list on hold, right? So that's why it's asking me, are you sure you want to do this? And yes, I'm pretty sure I want to do it. So now it's going to go ahead and create that search object. It's going to put a flag on every single one of those mailboxes in that list. And then finally, it's going to say, if anybody tries to tamper with this stuff, we'll make sure that it doesn't happen. There you go. So that's your in-place hold and e-discovery workflow. Any questions? Yeah. Is there any way you can get to the mic?
If the group membership changes, does that change the query?
At this point of time, no. You'll have to manually manage that, but I'm sure you can write some, you guys are experts, you can write some scripts to automatically update the whole, and that can be done. It's just a source mailbox thing, so it's a simple parameter on your new mailbox search, and you can keep updating that. Right, so this is the new in-place hold. Now, how does this actually work? I keep saying that if you put the query, it just works. It's jelly beans. So let's say your mailbox is a bunch of jelly beans, right? What we're actually trying to do is, let's say you have a pet rat, and you train the pet rat to eat everything other than the red jelly beans. And that's effectively what it is. We tell the manage folder assistant to say, anything that matches this query, don't delete it. Anything else, you delete it. So the manage folder assistant, as I mentioned before, it's an automated process that runs every day, or you can schedule it to run however you want it to, and that's going to obey the query. It's going to go into Deepak's mailbox, and it's going to say, hey, Deepak is on this hold. I'm going to go through the query. I'm going to see if there's any item matching that query, I'm going to leave it there. Anything else that doesn't match the query and is past its expiration date, I'm going to delete it. So that's the analogy over here, and that's how we've implemented it. If you want the actual working, there you go. So your recoverable items folder, which is the hidden folder that I was talking to you about, is where everything is stored. So this particular folder over here, it's called discovery holds. What this folder does is it stores all the data that the user thinks he has purged. It's going to go in there, and then we will basically run the manage folder assistant on the discovery holds folder, and we will make sure that anything that doesn't satisfy the query gets deleted, and anything that satisfies the query stays in there for the time period that I mentioned in my in-place hold. So that's the in-place hold feature that we've introduced. Now, how does this, so when I talk about in-place hold, and I mentioned this before, we have something called guaranteed deletion and guaranteed retention. What does that mean? As I mentioned before, you want to keep your data for a certain amount of time. You want to make sure that nothing happens to the data for a certain amount of time. But the second that time runs out, you have to make sure that that data gets deleted. And the way we do that is through a combination of in-place hold and retention policies. So that's your data governance. What is data governance? I specifically have a picture of a hoarder, I think. If you go search for hoarders in Bing search or Google search, this is the image you get that is Creative Commons approved. I was actually going to put a different one. But anyway, so your mailbox should not have more data than it's supposed to have, right? Now, the way you enforce that is through retention policies. How many of you have used managed folders in 2007 and 2010? Anybody who moved from managed folders to retention tags? The same number of people, I hope. In 2013, we have retired managed folders, so you will no longer be able to do that. At least in 2010, you had a choice of doing managed folders or retention tags, but in 2013, we've decided to retire managed folders. Now, so that means I need to talk about retention tags. What's a tag? So the way we do it today in Exchange is it's really simple, it's really straightforward. Let's say you have a mailbox, and I talked to you about this cool assistant that runs. You're basically telling the assistant what to do. So a tag basically tells the assistant whether the assistant should move an item to an archive, whether it should delete the item, or just skip that item and don't do anything with it. Let it be where it is. So those are the two properties of a tag: the action, and then how long should the assistant wait after the message is received. And this is critical because we always use the message received property. And if you're sending it, that's the message created date. So after that amount of time is when this action happens. So that's what we call as a retention tag. Now, we wanted to make sure this feature was widely used, and we know that every single one of you has their own set of requirements for retention. So we wanted to make it as broad as possible. Unfortunately, this also meant that this thing became a little complicated. So bear with me while I just walk you through what this means. Now, a tag, there are three kinds of tags that we've created. As I mentioned before, we have customers from the insurance industry, for example, who want complete control over their users' mailboxes. The user has no say. If they receive an email, this email should be deleted after 2 years. The user cannot, try to do anything with it. He cannot, save it or put it somewhere else. He has to follow the retention policies of the customer. So for those kind of people, what we created was the default policy tag. Now, this applies to the entire mailbox. So if you think about the tag that I talked about before, the default tag, it can either do a move to archive, or it can do a delete, and it applies to the entire mailbox. So this means full control for the admin. The end user gets absolutely no say in how long the item lasts. Now, there is an intermediate set of customers who say, well, I do want complete control, but I want a little bit more granularity, which means, let's say, my inbox and outbox and my sent items, I want it to be deleted after 2 years. But the stuff in my deleted items, the stuff in my junk email, I don't want it to last that long. I want it to last just 30 days because it's junk. That can be done through your retention policy tag. Now, what that means is when you create a retention policy tag, it gives you a drop-down of all the system folders that you see in your Outlook and OVA, and you can specify exactly what action you want to apply on it and how long you want to wait before that action is applied. Again, two sets of customers that I've talked about. The third set, much more lenient. Microsoft is probably one of the third set because we do have a compliance policy, which means that we have to delete our data after, say, 7 years. But if we are running a long project that's going to last, for 10 years, let's say we are going to eradicate malaria in India, we know that it's going to take a really, really long time. So for those kind of people, we make sure that we give the end users some kind of control to make sure that that item does not get deleted by the policies that the admin has set. So this is why we introduced personal tags. Now what this means is we give access for retention in your Outlook and OVA, and I'll show you how that works. This effectively means the end user has control over how long he can keep data in his mailbox. This is also useful if let's say, in Microsoft, we have a DL that talks about climbing Mount Rainier. Everyone wants to climb Mount Rainier. So everyone's excited come summertime. They keep sending emails about, hey, I want to climb, I want to climb. Yeah, we all know that everyone wants to climb, but if you're part of that DL, you know that your mailbox is going to fill up really, really quickly. So what we do is, you set a 2-day policy, says anything older than 2 days in this, just delete it. I'll make sure that whatever comes today, I'll read about it, but that's it. So this is a really, really nice feature to use if you're doing that kind of inbox cleanup or mailbox cleanup. It's a great feature for the end users to have. And this particular one is available for both the item level and at the folder level. What that means is you can go and set a retention tag on each and every individual item. You can actually create exceptions on an item. If you set it on a folder, everything that matches or everything that is inside that folder will get the tag that the folder has. Let me do a quick demo on what that looks like. So if you see Garth, I can go into mailbox features, and if you see here, there's something called retention policy. Now, where do you actually go and set the retention policy? And that's over here. Now, I go into retention tags. So every organization, especially if you're a customer of us in Office 365, we give you a default MRM policy. It kind of helps you build your own policy. So the first thing you need to do, as I mentioned, is a retention tag. So as I mentioned before, 3 kinds of tags. The first one is your default. The second one is the one that you apply to each and every system folder. And the third one, which can be applied by the end users themselves. So let's say I want to do the first one. So I give it a name, test tag 1. And if you see, those are the actions. You can do a delete and allow recovery. You can do a permanently delete or move to archive. And you can set a retention period when the item reaches that certain age. Let me show you what the other ones look like. Our default folder. Again, if you see the drop down over here, you get all the default folders that you get in your Outlook. So you've got your inbox, junk email, journal, outbox, sent items, etc. So it gives you a lot more control and a lot more granularity while applying the retention tag. And then finally, the last one, it's your personal tag applied by the users. Again, really simple. You give it a name, you give it the action and the time frame, and it's going to create the tag. You had a question, ma'am?
Yes, I did. I work for an organization that has a lot of different business needs in a lot of different areas. So can you manage who is able to set a personal tag?
So it can be done through, the personal tag.
Yes. Like, let's say I have an area where, for business reasons, we don't want the users setting personal tags at all.
Okay.
Are we able to prevent them from doing that?
So if you look at this, there are different levels of containment. The tags are, kind of individual strands of paper. You put the papers together to create a book, and that book is called a policy. And you take that book and you give it to students, right? The students are your mailboxes. So it's the same analogy. You can create a bunch of tags. You can put it inside a policy, and you can choose to apply which policy to which mailbox. Does that help answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Sure. So that's how you actually do control, because those are the varying levels of control that we provide. So you put in a bunch of tags. So each policy, as I mentioned, it's like a book. A policy can have a default tag. A policy can have multiple retention tags and multiple personal tags. And let's say you want to make use of the archiving feature, right? You want to make sure that the user's inbox isn't full, but you also want to make sure that the stuff gets deleted after a certain point of time. And you can do this really intelligently. You say, I create an inbox retention policy tag for a move to archive after 6 months, and the inbox retention policy tag with a permanently delete after 1 year. What's that going to do? Let's say I receive an email today. It comes to my inbox. It's in my inbox. I'm not doing anything with it. I've read it. It's still there. I'm a piler. 6 months later, the manage folder assistant is going to come in and say, hey, this particular item, it's set to be moved to the archive. So it's going to move it to the archive. Now, it's still accessible to me. I can still go into my archive and look at it. I can go reply. I can move it back. I can do whatever I want with it. But in 99% of the cases, I know I'm not going to do that. So now it's sitting in my archive. Now my deletion tag, which is going to be kicking in 1 year, so 6 months after it has been moved to the archive, that particular item gets deleted. Now, if you notice, it's kind of a cascading process. So that's kind of what we recommend as the best practice when you're designing your retention policy tags and your personal tags. Do a cascading effect so that stuff moves to your archive first and then gets deleted. Now, when I mention, there are two types of users that we typically see, and I'm sure you guys know about this. There are the filers who put everything in their inbox, right? Your inbox is extremely long. You have a very limited set of folders, and those you probably have rules for. Now, there's the other set of users who are super organized. I'm definitely not one of those guys, but I know my manager is, and he has a folder for every single thing. If he receives an email from me, he's got a Deepak folder. If he receives an email from Sanjay, he's got a separate folder for him, and so on and so forth, right? Now, for both these kinds of people, when we design the archive mailbox and the retention tag feature, let's say there was an item inside my manager's Sanjay folder, right? It's got a 6-month move to archive tag on it. When 6 months go by, that item has to get moved to the archive. Now, when my manager goes looking for emails from Sanjay, he's going to go into the archive, and he's going to be surprised if there's one long list of items and he's not able to find it. Yes, he can search for it, but that's a terrible experience. So what we did was, when an item moves to the archive and it came from some folder, we create an exact same named folder in the archive mailbox where it gets moved. So for the pilers, it's a seamless experience, which means the same folder that they were looking at over there, you get to see the same folder here, easy to find, easy to search. And the other thing about archiving and the client, I failed to mention this earlier, but just came to my mind. How many of you have actually looked at Outlook 2013 today? What do you show of any one person, if you can, say what is the single greatest feature of Outlook 2013? Anyone? Okay, anybody? OST trimming? Yeah, great answer. Anything else? You're on the right track, though. How many of you know about the slider in Outlook 2013? Great. So the slider in Outlook 2013, I think, is the coolest feature. The reason is, I don't know, the slider basically says, I only want to synchronize X months of email into my OST, right? You can slide it around. By default, it's 12 months. You can make it 1 year, 6 months, whatever you want. What that means is your Outlook 2013 is never, ever going to have performance issues because it's only going to download that amount of data even if you're in cache mode. Now you might say, well, what about the email that's older than 12 months old? So the single greatest feature is they can go search the server for items that hasn't been downloaded to your Outlook 2013. I don't know if I can show you mine. Unfortunately, it's got a lot of confidential information, but if you get a chance, you should try it out. The integration with search is really simple. You get a list of items, and you say, and there's a little text on the bottom that says, search for more, or search on the server. So one click, and it's going to retrieve all that information. What this means is we can now have a really, really large primary mailbox, and it's pretty awesome because you no longer are constrained by that OST size of Outlook. With the trimming, we can actually sync up to 50 gigs of data from Exchange Server into the Outlook 2013 OST. So thanks for that particular call as well. Now, getting back to retention, once you have your personal tags, I was over here. So over here, yeah. So you create your personal tags, you put them into a policy, and then in your policy, so I would go in here, I've got my default MRM policy. If you see in here, I've got a bunch of tags, right? All the tags, so I can either go here, add a tag to it, or remove a tag. So now I've got the tags, I've got the container, which is the policy. The next thing I need to do is go to my mailbox, which is what I showed you earlier, and apply that policy, right? So I've selected default MRM policy, and I hit save. See if that got applied. There you go. So that's over there. Now, it usually takes a bit of time for the MRM policy to apply. So one way to actually kick it off is by doing a manual start manage folder assistant. That's going to go ahead and run the MRM policy or apply the policy on the mailbox. When that happens, what usually happens is the user will now be able to see the retention tags, the personal tags especially, in OA, in Outlook, and he can apply it to every single individual item. So, and it's a scheduled job, so your server schedules it. Whenever it thinks that the time is right, all the resources are healthy, it goes ahead and starts the manage folder assistant. I'm going to give it one shot. I don't know why it's playing with me like this. Yeah. Over here. Let me try that. That might work. Forgot a Y. Awesome. Thanks, Sanjay. That was the trick. So there you go. You now see the in-place archive. You click it. As you see, right now I don't have anything in there, but once your retention policy starts kicking in, you should be able to move items into that archive. Oh, I know what happened. So when I ran start manage folder assistant, this is kind of hilarious, but if you see the policy that I just created, the default MRM policy, it's got a inbox 2-day delete right there. I'm sorry, I was going to show you guys how you can go and set personal tags, but when I was playing around, I kept it there. So it works. It's good to know. Yeah, so that's why you don't see any data in there. I actually had data in here for showing how cool our e-discovery was, but all of that is lost now. Anyway, so this is how you go and assign a policy. So these are your personal tags. You can say, do a 1-year move or a 5-year move, etc., and it's just going to apply those tags. Yes, sir, you had a question.
Yeah, I don't know. Okay, it's on. So I was a bit unclear on the but mandatory tags versus default tags applied at the mailbox level by the organization, for example. So like you were mentioning, let's say your organization has a 7-year retention, but you can override it and say, I'll go to 10 years on certain items, versus the insurance company, which is mandatory, you cannot override. So how do you set that up so it's default versus mandatory?
Great question. Thanks for asking. So if you go here, now it depends on how you create your policy, right? So in my policy, I can, let's say, test policy. I go here, and I see all the tags. Now, let me maximize this so you can actually see this. You see the type over here? So if I'm an insurance company, I'm not going to include any of those personal tags in my policy. I'm just going to make sure that I introduce only the default tag right there, right? So your default move to archive or your default delete. So that's how you do it. So when you create the policy, you put those items in the container, and then you apply those to all the mailboxes. And it's really simple to do it through the shell as well. So anyway, we know that MRM works. We know that archiving works. Now I've got a really nice, piece of information for all of you guys. We've talked about all of this. The one customer who was willing to talk about how they deployed Exchange 2013, Microsoft. So we've taken this to heart. Our e-discovery team and our LCA team, they are now completely on Exchange 2013. We do not use any other third-party archiving system. We do not use any other third-party data collection systems. It's all Exchange SharePoint 2013 compliance features. So you might probably guess we are heavily litigated, right? The total e-discovery cost for us was almost 10 million. For every gigabyte of data that we had to produce, it usually cost us $10,000 because there were so many people involved. And I'll explain this. Like I mentioned before, the different levels of e-discovery that we have, the first step, your custodians, the preservation, that is where your in-place hold comes in. Before, we had litigation hold, and I'll actually show you guys what it looked like back in 2010. So we had all these disparate sources. We had our Exchange mailboxes, we had local data, file shares, and SharePoint. All of this had to be put into a separate container. So that's our litigation data repository that we use. Unfortunately, I can't tell you which company we use for that. But all of this went into a third-party tool. Now, from there, it was minimized, and then it went to the lawyers. So anything that says completely outsourced, that is not what your Exchange or SharePoint compliance falls under. And all the other vendors, they don't go below the gray area as well. So, like I mentioned, this was our workflow before. As you see, heavy dependency on third-party solutions. However, Wave 15, completely on Microsoft. We have SharePoint, Exchange, and Link working together. And the best part about this is all this data is in place, which means we do not have to make copies. We do not have to take it out. We do not have to maintain 2 separate e-discovery searches, none of that. Huge cost savings for us, huge simplicity because we literally have to go to one place. And if you see the benefits, right, from weeks, we are now down to hours and minutes, which is amazing. And our LCA team actually did a huge demo for us, and it's an organization-wide movement that we've had in order to adopt this. Significant cost savings, although I cannot tell you how much. For all the people who came up to me and said, we are thinking of deploying Exchange 2013, but we don't see the cost benefits. This is your biggest cost benefit. This and your cheap storage disks, incredible. It's seriously saved us a lot of money. And as I mentioned before, if you have SharePoint, Exchange, and Link running, the federated search and federated discovery makes it a piece of cake for the IT admin, for the compliance officers, for everyone involved. It's a really simple and straightforward way to do this. We will soon be publishing a white paper on this. I don't know the exact dates, But feel free to give any of us a shout, and we'll make sure that when it is published, we'll let you know that it's out. And it contains a lot more details than what I've mentioned over here. So again, for all the people who are thinking about Exchange 2013, but the business decision makers say cost, you can take this to them and say, Microsoft did this, they're heavily litigated, they use their own tools, and it's worked for them. So it's a great piece of information to take back to all your business decision makers. Yes, sir. So at this point of time, no. It's a great question, and that's great feedback for our team while we design our next set of features. As you know, we are iterating, and if you're an Office 365 customer, we'll make sure that this feature goes up in the list, because we've had a lot of our financial customers specifically ask for that. So thanks for the feedback, and we'll definitely get back to you. And feel free to give us a card so we can talk to you later about that. Yep. So this is what I had. So the key benefits, once again, just going back to the key benefits, takeaways, risk mitigation, your legal hold. Again, we guarantee immutability, fewer data collection points, and then the fact that you do everything from one place makes it much more simpler and make sure that there are no manual errors or nothing gets left out. The minimal business interruption, which is simplicity. You don't have to go and interfere with the daily workflow of the end user. It's really easy for the IT admin to do this, and the fact that data is preserved in place. You don't have to go look for it in another place. You don't have to pay for storage in another location. All of this, you get the goodness with Exchange. You get it with your compliance features. And finally, as I mentioned, costs, your in-place hold. Once again, one place to do it all, and there is no need to use third-party tools for processing, etc. It's really simple, and the cost savings are immense, and we'll show it through what we've done with Microsoft. So a quick summary again, we talked about the archiving part. We talked about how Exchange mailboxes can now scale really big. We talked about the great features that we've built for the end users and the IT admins. We've built the in-place hold, which is item-based, query-based, and time-based hold. Great integration with e-discovery. And then finally, your records management or retention policy, which ensures that the stuff that needs to be deleted gets deleted on time, stuff that needs to be moved to the archive gets moved to the archive on time. So thank you all for listening. It's been really great, a pleasure talking to you guys. Any questions? We still have a lot of time for questions. And my teammates are all in the front row over there. They'll be able to answer your questions as well. We'll be down at the office booth. Thank you all.